بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين نسألك التوفيق والهداية والأنوار والبركات والعفو والعافية يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيد المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I extended the time. Initially I was having 1 hour to do the talk, but we extended at the last minute, so please forgive us and bear with us, as I realized that it was just not possible to cover this area in 1 hour. Partly because a lot of these ideas are something quite new that people may have not have come across before. And there's no point doing something half-heartedly and then leaving people without much of an idea of what's happening. So inshallah we'll be going until about quarter to 4, up to 4 o'clock perhaps, when then Shaykh Imran Hussain inshallah will be live beaming in. Can I just get a quick show of hands? How many people have actually read the article about the Yajuj wa Majuj on the website? Yeah, so a couple of people. How many people have listened to Shaykh Imran Hussain's talks about Gog and Magog, Yajuj wa Majuj, or read any of his books about the subject? Yeah, a few people as well. Okay, inshallah. Now, whenever you bring a new idea or a new interpretation, there will always be a resistance to that initially, which is to be expected, especially when it's something of a matter of this deen, because the Prophet ﷺ warned very severely against bringing any new matter into this deen. So by the very nature of our traditional scholars are very conservative and will be very careful when any type of new interpretation or new thing comes in, and they will evaluate it very carefully and very critically. So bringing something new, as Shaykh Imran Hussain has done, is always something that is can be quite controversial to begin with. Now I'll give you some examples. Imam Al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he died a scholar who was actually outcast from the towns where he taught and lived. Imam Al-Bukhari, one of the greatest of our imams of our ummah, during his own lifetime his work was not widely accepted. He was rejected by many of the greatest scholars of his time. Why? He had brought something new, something completely new. What was that? He had collected only the Sahih into one place. No one previously had done that. None of the great Hadith scholars had done that. They had been collecting and transmitting the Hadith, Sahih, Hasan, Da'if, whatever was there, they would transmit with the isnads. So this was something radically new. He said, I'm going to compile a book where I'm going to put only the Sahih. This was rejected by many of the great scholars of his time and widely accepted after his death. He became widely accepted, his book. And there's many other examples. Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, his book Ihya Ulumuddin was burnt in certain places by the scholars of certain cities. So when you get people who are thinking and bringing something fresh or new, there will always be a resistance, and there will be a process of criticism, a process of discussion, and then it will be either accepted or rejected by the ummah. And that is the beauty of this ummah, that it's been protected from error. La tajtami'u ummati ala dalala. This community will never gather upon error. So there's many strong proofs about the ijma' of this ummah, the consensus of this ummah. So where all of the Muslims agree upon something, it becomes a qat'i, a definitive proof. So, you may have noticed, those who read the article, I didn't put on there Gog and Magog were the Vikings. Yeah? I crept it in, because if I'd put that, probably people would have looked at the title and said, Dr. RIdhwan's gone crazy like some of his patients. So it's something new. Today I'm not here today to persuade you that Ya'juj wa Ma'juj were the Vikings. I'm just, the plan I have today is to describe to you the process of how I came to that conclusion. And then leave the rest up to you to think about it for yourselves and decide for yourselves. And it will be people like yourselves that will decide whether this is true or not true. Yeah? People who are Tulab al-Ilm, people who are students of knowledge, you're the people who will decide. And that's how this ummah always works. Yeah? And from the outset, I would clearly and categorically state that this may be completely wrong. This whole theory may be completely wrong. But there may be some benefits anyway in some of the research I did. Even if Ya'juj wa Ma'juj are not the Vikings, there still may be benefit in some of the research I did regarding European civilization. So I'm going to take you through the journey itself. To do this, I'll start by saying, first of all, also, some people might say, what's the point of talking about Gog and Magog, Dajjal, signs of the last day? What's the point? How is it going to affect us? How does it change anything? I personally believe that is an error. That is an error. Because there's a very important reason why the Prophet ﷺ gave us the alamatu sa'ah, the signs of the coming of the last day. And there's a very important reason why the Quran has also mentioned some of these alamat. About Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, about the dabba, the beast that will come out, is in the Quran. Now, and the Hadith of Gibreel alayhi salam is one of the strong proofs that, if people probably know the Hadith of Gibreel alayhi salam, Imam Nawawi puts a second Hadith in his book, which is Sahih, in which Gibreel alayhi salam came to a group of Sahaba and came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 5 questions. And this was a very unique and very powerful hadith, which is why it's considered one of the strong foundational hadiths of this religion, because it came right towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's life. And secondly, it was one of the few occasions when the Sahaba that were with the Prophet ﷺ actually saw Gibreel alayhi salam. It was very rare for the Sahaba to actually see Gibreel alayhi salam. It's not easy to see a malak. It's not easy for a human being to bear the sight of Gibreel alayhi salam. So this was a unique occasion when Umar ibn Khattab and other Sahaba that were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, they saw Gibreel alayhi salam, who had come in the form of a man. And Gibreel alayhi salam asked 5 questions. And after he asked the 5 questions, he went, and the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba, that was Gibreel, he came to teach you your deen. Ataakum yu'allimukum deenakum. He came to teach you your deen. So what does that tell us? That those 5 questions sum up and summarize our deen, our whole deen, the deen of Islam. And 2 of those questions were related to the last day. In one of them he said, he asked about the last day itself, and the Prophet ﷺ said, the questioner knows no more than the question. And then the final question was, tell me some of the signs. Amaratiha, tell us some of the signs of the last day. And the Prophet ﷺ then mentioned 2 of the signs. So this indicates how important it is, the signs. These signs have been given to us so that we may recognize them when they come about. And so then we may understand the age we live in. You understand? So I would like to start. The topic today is Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. We'd like to start by just mentioning the ayahs of Quran which mention the Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. There's 2 places in the Quran where Ya'juj and Ma'juj are mentioned explicitly. One is towards the end of Surah Al-Kahf, and one is in Surah Al-Anbiya, just 1 ayah. In Surah Al-Kahf there's a few ayahs which Sidi Omar recited earlier on. So I'm just we've had the Arabic recitation, so I'll just get the English translation of those ayahs. This is very important because to understand about Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, or Gog and Magog, the Quran is obviously the primary source of knowledge before anything else. And then we will go to the Sahih Hadith, the strong Hadith. And when dealing with the last day and signs of the last day, be very careful where you have to go to the strongest sources first before you go to weaker sources. Because of the very nature of these signs. You know, the time we live in today, the age we live in, is such a puzzling and unique age that human beings haven't witnessed in our known history. We don't know what happened before, you know, what happened before thousands of years ago. But the history that we do know, we don't know of any other time when civilization has been the way it is now. Technology and the sort of lives that we live is something unprecedented that we never heard of before. So to understand this time, we have to really go to the strongest sources possible. And I say this because there are many, many weak hadith out there that will just confuse people. And they will confuse people. I don't say that there's no use in weak hadith, as our ulama have said. We do, weak hadith do not mean they're fabricated. We do use weak hadith and we take benefit from them. But when we come to alama to sa'a, to understand these things, we need to go to the strongest sources first. So what does the Quran say about Ya'juj wa Ma'juj? So in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a man called Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn, which literally in Arabic means the one who has two horns, or the translation that Shaykh Imran Hussain prefers is the man of two times. Because qarn can be horn and can also be a time, a century or an epoch or a time, an age. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Dhul Qarnayn, but He doesn't mention is he a prophet or was he a righteous man. So the ulama had discussion about that. I feel that the stronger opinion is that he was a prophet. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ataynahu min kulli shay'in sababa. That Allah gave this man a means to everything. A means to everything. So he was given immense power. So the Mufassirun say he was one of those people who was given a world dominion. One of those people who was given a world order. And then the Quran describes that he went towards the west. He went to the furthest west, where he was given power over those people in the furthest west. And then he traveled to the furthest east. And then the Quran says, and this is where Ya'juj wa Ma'juj come, then it says, then followed he another way. So first it says west, to Maghrib al-Shams means the furthest west, where the sun actually sets. Then Matli' al-Shams, to the furthest east, where the actual sun rises. And then he went another way, it doesn't say which direction. Until he reached a tract between two mountains. Baina Saddain. Saddain actually is barriers, but this here means mountains, two mountains. He found beneath them a people who scarcely understood a word. Then they said, O Dhul Qarnayn, the Ya'juj and Ma'juj people do great mischief on the earth. Shall we render you a tribute in order that you may erect a barrier between us and them? So these people that he found, they said to him that Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they are creating a lot of corruption, mufsidun. They are creating a lot of destruction and corruption. We'll pay you if you will put a barrier between us and them. We'll pay you a tribute, meaning a regular, in other words, we'll recognize your sovereignty on the condition that you get rid of these people for us. Indicating that Dhul Qarnayn was given massive power. The Quran says he found a people that could barely understand a word. But then the next ayah said, they said, O Dhul Qarnayn, can you do this? Now it's not clear that those people who could barely understand a word, was it those people who spoke to Dhul Qarnayn and asked him to to put the barrier up? Or was it the Yajuj Majuj themselves are the ones that could barely understand a word? Which is something that will come in my article later on. So he said then to them, Dhul Qarnayn said to these people, he said, what Allah has given me is better than what you can pay me. I don't want your money or your tribute. But however, I will help you. Yeah? Help me therefore with strength. I will erect a strong barrier between you and them. Bring me blocks of iron. At length, when he had filled up the space between the two steep mountain sides, he said, blow. Then when he had made it a fire, you blow on the fire, on the iron and the fire, he said, bring me that I may pour over it molten lead. Yeah? Or I believe in some translation may say copper, I'm not sure. So he built this barrier of iron and lead. Thus were they made powerless to scale it or dig through it. So they could not get through. The Yajuj and Majuj could not get past this barrier. They were shut off. He said, this is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord comes to pass, he will make it into dust. And the promise of my Lord is true. On that day, then Allah says, on that day we shall leave them to surge like waves on one another. This is the Yajuj and Majuj themselves. So I'll talk about later how the Vikings were people that not only fought and tried to colonize others, they were always fighting each other. They were always fighting each other. Yeah, so we will leave them to surge like waves one another. The trumpet will be blown and we shall collect them all together. So then the final day will come after this. These people are released. So that is the Surah Al-Kahf. The other reference in the Quran, it comes in Surah Al-Anbiya, just one ayah mentions them. And I'm going to read also the ayah before, because Shaykh Imran, which I'm going to explain soon, is one of the things that he's linked to the ayah before. And it actually does link grammatically to the ayah before anyway. So this is ayah number 95 and 96, Surah Al-Anbiya. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. There is a prohibition upon a town which we have destroyed, that they will ever return, that they will never return, meaning the people of the town. They will never return until when Gog and Magog are released and they come down from every elevation. They come down from every elevation or every place. Okay, so these are the ayahs of Quran, first of all. Yeah. So this is the primary source of knowledge we have about Yajuj wa Majuj. Secondly, we go to the Sahih Hadith, the strongest Hadith that are available to us. Now probably the strongest, or if not the strongest, or one of the strongest, is a Hadith in Sahih Al-Bukhari narrated by 4 different Sahaba. Yeah. So not only is it the strongest of Sahih in Al-Bukhari, but it's also narrated from 4 different Sahaba, which makes it very, very strong. Perhaps even mutawatir. I haven't looked into whether it reaches a status of mutawatir, and that status can differ according to different scholars. But nevertheless, it's close to, or actually mutawatir, meaning of a definitive status in its transmission. In this hadith, what happens? We'll read the narration from Zainab bin Jahsh, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. She said, radiyallahu anha, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دخل عليها فزعا. One day the Prophet ﷺ came to her fazi'an. Now pay attention to this very strong word to use with regard to the Prophet ﷺ. Very unusual to describe the Prophet ﷺ to be in a state of faza', which means actually fear. Yeah, it means fear. Very unusual that the Prophet ﷺ would be described in such a state, unless it was something to do with the akhirah, or something of a tribulation of the akhirah, you see. So, indicating that the fitna of Yajuj wa Majuj is ultimately a tribulation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah, the Prophet ﷺ doesn't fear anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see what I mean? And what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, La ilaha illallah. First of all, taking the shahada. Waylun lil Arab min sharrin iqtarab. Woe be to the Arabs from an evil that has come close. From an evil that has come close. Futiha al-yawm min radmi Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mithlu hadhihi. He said, today a breach has occurred in the barrier of Ya'juj wa Ma'juj like this. And he made a sign with his thumb and finger. قالت زينب بن جحش فقلت يا رسول الله أنهلك وفينا الصالحون. Zainab said to him, would we be destroyed while there are still righteous people amongst us? Would we be destroyed while there are righteous people amongst us? قال نعم إذا كثر الخبث. He said, yes, when the impurity becomes prominent or predominant. Impurity, meaning, corruption, badness amongst the Muslims themselves. When that becomes predominant, then you will be destroyed. Okay, what other hadith do we have in the Sahih? People are probably familiar with the hadith, a long hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talks about the coming of Dajjal. And then the coming of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. I won't talk about Dajjal because Shaykh Imran is going to be talking on that subject later. The coming of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. And in that hadith, then the Prophet ﷺ says, when the Prophet Isa alayhi salam will come, he will destroy the Dajjal. And after the Dajjal has been killed, then Prophet Isa alayhi salam will live in peace with the Muslims. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send against them the Yajuj wa Majuj. He will send against Prophet Isa alayhi salam and the Muslims the Gog and Magog. And it says in that hadith that they will be given, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, I am sending certain of my slaves that no one is able to fight except me. These people will be given such a power, such a huge immense power, that no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can fight against. Yeah? So these are the main references in the Quran and the Sahih. Like I said, there are many weak hadith regarding Yajuj wa Majuj, we have to first go to the strongest sources for knowledge about these events that will take place. So this is the sort of background. This is the background that we had from the Quran and the Sahih. These things are mentioned. Many years ago, I studied with one of my teachers, Shaykh Hamza Yusuf. And he's someone, and the thing about the alamatu sa'a, these signs of the last day, they won't be understood except by people that Allah wishes for them to understand. They will not be understood except by people who have been given spiritual insight by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not claiming to be one of them, but I believe I sat with some people who had those insights. And Shaykh Hamza Yusuf is one of them. And he focused a lot on the alamatu sa'a, the signs of the last day. And you probably all may have heard of his talk about Dajjal and things like that. Now, one of the things I heard him say about Yajuj wa Majuj, however, Gog and Magog, he said, this is something I've reflected upon for a long time and really thought about. And I can't understand. I don't know. I can't give any, I've come to I'm confused. I don't know. I can't explain it. You understand? So that was my background on my understanding of Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. So we're studying with my teachers. We accept what's in the Quran, we accept what's in the Sahih, but not necessarily we understand everything. And maybe some things will become more clear as time goes on. As is the nature of alamatu sa'a, they become manifest and become more clear as time goes on. So now, what happened next? I came across Shaykh Imran Hussain. Brother Omar, one of my friends who attends some of my classes, introduced me to Shaykh Imran Hussain. Yeah? You might have seen some of his videos. They're becoming quite popular now on YouTube and places like that. So I, with interest, listened to some of his talks. And my initial reaction was, that's just too much, Like I said, this is natural. When someone comes with something new, your initial reaction is always going to be, and plus, because he was talking a lot about things that are going to happen. He has a lot of predictions about what will happen based on his understanding of those alamatu sa'a. And from my knowledge and my study, most people who make prediction is always wrong. Yeah? Trust me, I've seen very pious, very great sheikhs that I respect a lot, and they've said certain things will happen and the things didn't happen. It's part of the nature of the times we live in. Yeah? Part of the nature of the times we live in, where also perhaps time is distorted. The Prophet ﷺ talked about that, about time speeding up towards the end. So time itself becomes distorted. So when I first read Shaykh Imran's stuff, I was quite skeptical. I was very impressed with his knowledge about European history, about the rise of capitalism and the global economic system and the monetary system. I thought, mashallah, this is someone rare who has got such a deep understanding of this whole thing, But to do with his predictions about, Dajjal and things that will happen, I was very skeptical, I'd say, to begin with. Then what happened, some of the things, however, they sort of start going around in my head. And, I started thinking, actually, some of these things are making sense to me. For example, one of the things he says is that Ya'juj and Ma'juj have already been released. We are now in the world order of Gog and Magog. This is the world order of Gog and Magog. Huh? So he said they were released at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So this was something new to me. I always thought they're going to come, Prophet Isa ﷺ comes, according to that hadith we mentioned earlier. So this was something new. This is like crazy. But what was his proof? What was his proofs? And this is the thing that convinced, and he's the first to say as well, don't take what I'm saying as, this is coming from ilham or revelation or anything. He said, these are just a theory, then here's the proof, evaluate for yourself. And that for me is a sign of a scholar. Many Muslims unfortunately have fallen into a type of Christian type of model of venerating saints and believing there's certain people, whatever they say is almost just like wahi again. But the wahi stopped with the Prophet ﷺ. If there were any people that were going to be of that nature, they would have been the Sahaba. But you don't see that with the Sahaba. You don't see Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu saying something and everyone saying, yeah, we accept this from Sayyidina Umar. It must be true. No, you see the Sahaba questioning him. You see other people questioning him. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu stood up on the mimbar and he said, if you see me going astray, what would you do? And one of the people in the audience lifted his sword over his head and said, we will straighten you with this, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. That was the way they were. The wahi stopped with the Prophet ﷺ. There is ilham, of course, we know that from the hadith, but it's not like wahi. Someone who has ilham might not even know they have ilham. Okay, they have sort of an inspiration or something. So this for me was a sign of a true scholar who says, look, this is a theory, evaluate for yourself. Now what was his proofs why he said Ya'juj wa Ma'juj have been released? First of all, that Sahih Hadith. Al-yawm futihat fi radmi Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. Today, a breach has occurred in the barrier of Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. Today, the Prophet ﷺ said. And what did Zainab say? She said, would we be destroyed? Would we be destroyed while there are righteous people amongst us? Now there's another hadith in Tirmidhi, which people may be aware of, in which it says every day Gog and Magog, they dig through the barrier until they nearly get through it, and then they go back, and when they come back the next day, the barrier is still gone back to its normal. So then they start digging again. Now that seems to contradict the idea that it's been broken, but what Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri says in his commentary on this, one of the great scholars of the recent times, he says that hadith of Tirmidhi, we have to discard it because it contradicts what is more sahih, what is more stronger, which is the hadith in Sahih Al-Bukhari. Yeah, so that's a principle in hadith studies. If you find a conflict, apparently a conflict in hadith which cannot be resolved in any other way, we take obviously what is stronger, what are the stronger transmissions. And we already mentioned the ones in Bukhari are from the strongest possible type of hadith, because not only is it sahih, but it's multiple chains from different sahaba. And on top of that, the sahaba who narrate them are not obscure sahaba, they're well-known sahaba. There are also sahih hadith which come from certain sahaba, which maybe the sahaba is not very well known. He only narrates one or two hadith. The narrators of this hadith are people like Anas ibn Malik, some of the very prominent narrators from the Sahaba. So Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri says we don't, because he also takes the position that Gog and Magog were released at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And the way I actually found that is something I'd like to share with you. Because Imran Hussein, he said perhaps, he's the first one to come with this idea that Gog and Magog were released at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But he also mentioned a verse of Allama Iqbal, the famous poet and scholar from the Indian subcontinent, who has a verse of poetry which indicates that he may have also believed that Gog and Magog have already been released. Yeah. The verse of poetry is, obviously in Urdu, but I'll just read the English. With cleverness or wisdom and prudence, this uproar, chaos cannot be delayed. Because وَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ, Gog and Magog all have been released. The Muslim eye will see the meaning of Yansilun. Yansilun is from the ayah where it says that Ya'juj wa Ma'juj will come down from every place. Yansilun. So Imran Hussein, he says, look, this is Allama Iqbal. He probably also believed that Gog and Magog have been released. But apart from that, no one else has said this. However, I found Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri has clearly takes the same position. And the way I found it was quite strange, alhamdulillah. I was actually, it came, by total complete chance. And obviously we don't believe in chance, but I actually wanted to read the commentary about Ya'juj wa Ma'juj in Fathul Bari, the famous commentary on Sahih Al-Bukhari by Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani. So I was going on to I have a database, computer database of all the hadith books and everything. And I was intending to look at Fathul Bari. But for some reason, which is a book that I refer to quite often for, it's the most famous commentary on Bukhari. For some reason in my head, it came Faidul Bari, which is actually a commentary by Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri, a scholar who died, I believe he died in the early 20th century. He was one of the great Imams of his time from the Indo-Pak subcontinent, famous for his Hadith and Quran, etc. But I was not intending to look in his book at all. So I just clicked on Faidul Bari instead of Fathul Bari. And I opened up that and it said, his thing, it said, Gog and Magog have been released during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. And he gave the same proof that Imran Hussein gives, these hadith, وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبْ مِنْ شَرٍ اقْتَرَبْ الْيَوْمْ فُتِحَ فِي رَدْمِ يَجُوجْ وَمَجُوجْ. So I was saying, subhanAllah, this actually quite strengthens the opinion of Shaykh Imran Hussein, because you have a great authority like Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri. So that's in the article as well. Now, Imran Hussein, he was saying also that this is the world order of Gog and Magog that we're in now. This world order of European, American European civilization. And he said, look, they've been given such a power that no one can fight except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as is mentioned in the hadith. That I will give them such a power that no one can fight except me. And that was something I was reflecting upon, and I'm thinking, the more I thought about it, it made sense to me. Because that was something I had realized previously anyway, from my own studies. I don't know if people may have read an article I wrote about jihad. That was something I had already known, that in Sharia, probably it's not even permissible to fight these people. According to Sharia, because you're not allowed to fight a people that could destroy you with a click of a few buttons. Yeah? Literally, they could destroy us, or destroy people who fight them, with a click of a few buttons. They choose not to. They derogatorily call, like the war in Afghanistan is like a low intensity conflict for them. They actually term it a low intensity conflict. When the war first kicked off, it was a mid-intensity, but now it's gone to low intensity, to counterinsurgency. That's how they view these the so-called jihads that are taking place against them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to all of those people who are fighting for His cause. But that was my conclusions I had already come to. So that made sense to me. That yes. But then the other thing, the very unique interpretation that Imran Hussein brought relates to the other ayahs of Quran where Yajuj wa Majuj are mentioned in Al-Anbiya. That was the one we read earlier. Haramun ala qaryatin ahlaknaha annahum la yarji'un. It is forbidden upon a town that we have destroyed that they will ever return. And now that could be read two ways. And the way I always used to read it, haramun ala qarya, could be any town. It could be any town. It is haram upon any town that Allah has destroyed, that the people will ever return to the place that was destroyed, in other words. That was the way I read it, and most people read that ayah. However, it can also mean a town. Instead of any town, it can also mean a town. Grammatically in the Arabic, both meanings are possible. It is forbidden or haram upon a town that we destroyed. And so Shaykh Imran Hussein's, his theory, his interpretation is that this is a town, and that town is Jerusalem. And the people who were destroyed when that town was destroyed was the Jewish people. So they will never return to that town. Hatta idha futihat Yajuj wa Majuj. The next ayah says hatta, until Gog and Magog are released. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. And they come down from every place. So what Imran Hussein was saying, Gog and Magog, when the Jews went back to Jerusalem was a proof that Gog and Magog have already been released. It's linked. Now I was astounded when I first read this interpretation. I was absolutely astounded. Because you read the Quran, you read it a different way, but this was something amazing to me. And like I said, I was very skeptical as well. Yeah? But then, once again, reflecting upon it, Qarya, a town, is mentioned elsewhere in the Quran, referring to Jerusalem itself. It's mentioned elsewhere in the Quran, Qarya, Jerusalem is called Qarya elsewhere in the Quran. وَكَالَّذِي مَرَّ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ وَهِيَ خَاوِيَةٌ عَلَى عُرُوشِهَا. Mentioning about another prophet previously, who had passed by the town of Jerusalem, and he had asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how would you bring this town back to life? So it's called Qarya itself, Jerusalem is called Qarya elsewhere in the Quran. So this was, the sort of thought processes that were going on. So he was saying, the Gog and Magog world order makes possible for the Jews to go back to Jerusalem, based on those two ayahs of Quran. Now, so I looked at the tafsir, hatta, until Gog and Magog are released. I looked at the tafsir, what do the Mufassirun say? And yeah, there it was. Hatta goes back to haramun ala qaryatin annahum la yarji'un. Grammatically, that hatta, until, goes back to the ayah before. That it is forbidden upon the people of a town that they will ever return until Gog and Magog are released. Now that was always interpreted, or the tafsir always was taught, it doesn't mean literally when Gog and Magog are released, it means that this will be a sign of Qiyamah. You see what I mean? So in other words, when Allah destroys any town, the people will never come back to that town until the Day of Judgment, in other words. But the ayah doesn't actually say that. It says, Hatta idha futiyat Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, until Gog and Magog are released. It was taken as an interpretation that this must refer to the Day of Judgment. So, and then, you really have to read the books of Shaykh Imran here yourself to get the full impact of, because I read the books, and that's how I became more convinced about, because first of all, he talks a lot about why does Western Europe become obsessed with Jerusalem. Yeah? Why does Western Europe become obsessed with Jerusalem? You see what I mean? So he's linking it back to that. He's saying Western European civilization is the civilization of Gog and Magog. And can I please add, because I don't want to offend people, it doesn't mean that all European people or all white people are evil or Satans or anything like that. We don't have anything like that. Ya'juj wa Ma'juj are human people. So as with all human people, they can get hidayah and tawfiq as well, some of them. But these are general characteristics of different races that we're talking about. General characteristics, doesn't apply to every individual. It's like we say, for example, let's say Persian people are very intelligent. Yeah, that's something our scholars did used to say, that the Persians are very well noted for their intelligence. Does that mean if you go to Persia, you won't find in Iran one single dumb person? No. These are general characteristics. So please don't in any way demonize any people. We don't demonize any people. These are just trying to understand historical process and understand the time we live in now. They can be good and bad from any people. And the whole point of the world order of Gog and Magog is many people will follow them as well, that are not from that particular background, that particular racial or genetic background. Many people will be part of that world order as well. So, why does Western Europe become obsessed with Jerusalem all of a sudden? Why does Britain, a secular country, suddenly start talking about getting the Holy Land and sending the Jews back to the Holy Land. Britain, a secular, this is in 20th century we're talking. Not when it was in Christianity back in the Middle Ages, we're talking about 20th century. When was Israel created?
1948.
47, 48, yeah? We're talking about, this is a Britain at the height of its secularism, at the height of its atheism, suddenly it becomes obsessed with the Holy Land, and we want to get the Jews back to the Holy Land. What's that all about? So this is what Shaykh Imran is saying, and this is what's going around in my mind. That actually, yeah, there's a point there, So it all starts with the Crusades. Suddenly, and the Crusades happen after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So after the Prophet ﷺ said, today, Yajuj and Majuj have been released. Yeah? 3 centuries later, we see in Europe, suddenly Western Europe become obsessed with trying to take Jerusalem. They set out on all these crusades. This is not a Christian thing, because the main Christian power of the time was Byzantium, Eastern Rome. They had nothing to do with the crusades. In fact, they were very worried about the crusade, because crusaders actually looted and plundered them on the way to Jerusalem. So this is peculiar to Western Europe. This obsession for 300 years, the Crusades take place 300 years. Western Europe becomes obsessed with Jerusalem. They want to take Jerusalem. So think about that. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about those ayahs of Quran. Hatta idha futihat Yajuj wa Majuj. So this is how slowly I was getting slightly convinced. The third big thing, the new interpretation that Imran Hussain brought, is about Dajjal. The famous hadith about Dajjal, which is Sahih, that he will come for 40 days. The first day will be like 1 year, the second day like a month, the third day like a week, and the rest of the days will be like your days. Now what he said was, and this is once again novel interpretation, he said the day that will be like a year, and then a month, then a week, he will be in the unseen. And when he comes, the days that will be like your days will be in your realm, you see him as an individual. So once again, this is, But then, taking that further, he said the day that will be like a year is the time of the British Empire. The time when Britain is the ruling state in the world. And he will talk about this later, so I don't want to, but it's just to understand, the whole thing. The day that will be like a month is when America takes over as the ruling state of the world. And the day that will be like a week is when Israel takes over as the ruling state of the world, which is going to happen according to him. Prediction. And then after the period when Israel becomes the ruling state of the world, meaning the most powerful nation, the leading nation, we will see Dajjal, the individual, appear for the rest of those days. So once again I was like, subhanallah, this is like ajib, this is like strange stuff. Secondly, and he links it to the hadith of Tamim al-Dari. You heard of the hadith of Tamim al-Dari, the Sahih hadith in which one Sahaba, Tamim al-Dari, he told the Prophet ﷺ, we were on a ship, we got lost on the sea for many days, and we ended up on the island, and on the island we found this hairy beast, and the hairy beast then took them to Dajjal. You understand? So Shaykh Imran Hussain said that island is Britain. So this was something obviously completely new as well. Huh? The island was Britain. That's why the day that is like a year, Britain is the ruling state. That's where Dajjal starts. Then he moves to America, he moves to Israel, and then he will become manifest to the human eye. So once again, this was, just over months probably. I was just reflecting upon some of those things, thinking, I can see some sense there. Just historically, the historical process about Britain, the British Empire, the colonialism, and how then America takes over in the 20th century, as a leading state. And then Israel's going to take over. I was more skeptical about that. I didn't see Israel as such a powerful country. But then, so what he said was, for Israel to then take over, it will have to have a massive expansion of its territory. Because it's such a small country, it doesn't have the actual territorial base to be the leading nation of the world. It needs to have a massive expansion of its territory. It needs to have wars against its Arab neighbors. And this is the thing that really made me start taking Shaykh Imran more seriously, is because he predicted the Arab uprisings. He predicted the Arab uprisings. You know, and when Sidi Umar showed me some of his videos, you know, this was before the Arab uprising, so I saw him talking about that. And he said, you know, that there will be a series of massive uprisings in the Arab countries. He said this is all instigated, social engineering. You put in the Arab countries these TV channels like Al Jazeera, continuously feeding them pictures of how they're being killed, how their people are being oppressed. Continuously showing pictures of Palestinians being killed and oppressed. You're rising the anger, the feeling of the masses. So he said this is being done purposely. Because Israel needs those wars, it wants to expand its territory. But it doesn't want to be seen as the aggressor. So how will that come about? You will have uprisings in the Arab world, you will have these democratic movements that come about. Anyone could have predicted, if democracy comes to the Arab countries, the Ikhwan and Muslimeen are going to come into power. Anyone could have predicted that. Yeah? Americans knew very well that it's going to happen. The Ikhwan and Muslimeen will come into power. What's the Ikhwan and Muslimeen going to do? They're going to obviously be taking a very pro-American stance and trying to be friendly and everything, because they realize where power lies. They realize they're not going to come into power without the powerful nations of the world backing them. But by the very nature of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin or Muslim Islamic type of parties that will come in, they will be very, very focused against helping their Palestinian brothers. Any Muslim would be. And all of us are. You know, what more concern can we have than the oppression that's happening against the Palestinians? So that will lead to a hostility against Israel. That would not be possible with those dictators, which were obviously very friendly. So then Israel will start using that hostility, justifying what it wants to actually do, which is to wage war against those Arab neighbors and expand its territory massively. So this is the things he was saying before the Arab uprisings took place. Then the Arab uprisings took place. And then I really took him more seriously. Before that, it was all very much, you know, this is very much predictions about the future and all that, you know. Because, you know, my own knowledge of politics, I like to think of myself as dabbling in politics and political science. You can't predict things. You can not predict things. So then I started taking it more seriously, and I was like, subhanAllah, you know, it actually makes sense. Why did the Americans and the West start supporting those pro-democracy movements in those countries?